Welcome to Indus Special. I'm Ejaz Haider. The ongoing protests in India against the Citizenship Amendment Act took an ominous turn Thursday when a young man shot at protesters outside Jamia Millia in Delhi. Before the shooting, the gunman went live on Facebook to warn he was taking his final journey. Witnesses say he stood meters away from dozens of policemen outside Jamia Millia Islamia University, where more than 1,000 protesters had gathered for a march. Photographs corroborate that. Earlier this week, India's junior finance minister Anurag Thakur encouraged supporters at a state election rally in New Delhi to chant slogans calling for traitors to be shot. His statement drew a reprimand from the Election Commission. Meanwhile, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, speaking to military personnel Tuesday, said, and I quote, "Our armed forces will not take more than 7 to 10 days to make Pakistan bite the dust," unquote. Modi is under pressure after weeks of ongoing protests against a new citizenship law, the CAA, that we just talked about, a slowing economy, and the prospect of losing the latest in a string of state elections in New Delhi next month. The madness goes on. In the Indian state of Karnataka, Muslim school children in 4th and 5th grade were interrogated by the police because the school staged a play that opposed the CAA. Sedition charges have also been filed against the children. On 22nd January, the Indian Supreme Court granted bail to 14 convicts of Gujarat pogrom, asking them to do social work. The pogrom killed more than 2,000 Muslims, men, women, and children. The 14 convicts were convicted on charges of rape, arson, and murder. The Indian Supreme Court has also banned high courts in any state from hearing petitions challenging the controversial CAA. What is going on in India? To discuss the situation, we are joined by Lubna Sarwath. She is Secretary General Socialist Party in the Telangana state. We are also joined by Ms. T.K Rajlakshmi. Ms. Rajlakshmi is Senior Deputy Editor at Frontline and has a long and illustrious career as a journalist, and she looks at the specific social groups, violence against them, also gender and other issues. Thank you to both the panelists. Let me begin with Ms. Rajlakshmi. Ms. Rajlakshmi, this does seem like an ominous thing. We've seen this elsewhere. We've seen it in the US, in New Zealand, and elsewhere where people, take to the Facebook or other social media platform, go out and start shooting people. Fortunately, this person did not have an assault rifle, but if he did, this could have been even more violent. What are your views about this?
Yes, of course. One feels relieved that he was not armed with anything. In fact, armed with anything, as deadly as an assault rifle, but he was armed with a pistol, which itself is quite serious, and there has been concern about how he entered that area and with the and with policemen all around, and that he was able to fire a shot at the students. So there has been concern about this, but there has been even greater concern, and this has been shared by everybody that the atmosphere of the kind of language that has been used recently has not been very palatable, and that too by elected representatives. It's extremely unfortunate, and that is why the Election Commission of India has taken cognizance of that and has sort of barred those particular leaders from addressing campaigns and from being the star campaigners for a certain number of hours. Now, having said that, there has also been a demand from sections in the country that the process of law and order should also be applied in these cases where such language has been used, because the kind of language which has been used by the elected representatives of the government at the center has had the potential or in fact has the potential of causing enmity between communities, and therefore there has been this demand that under the IPC, that is the Indian Penal Code, there are provisions that under which those people can be booked. So so there is a demand, and yes, there is this acceptance that it is a lacuna in law. That it has not been applied to these people as yet. So we have the protests are also going on. The Anti-Citizenship Amendment Act protests are going on. It is an issue in the country, and we all hope that the government takes cognizance of that soonest.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, I do agree that there's so many people out on the streets in various parts of India protesting against this non-secularization, or shall I say the Hindutvaization of Indian constitution. But what we see is a certain kind of tacit encouragement of this from people in power. This is something which is new. Now, BJP has been in power before also under the late Mr. Vajpayee. Late Mr. Vajpayee was also at one point an RSS apparatchik. But his government did not really look like an RSS government. This one, by all accounts, seems to be following a certain agenda. Of course, as we see, there is a pushback from people who don't want India to go that way. But there is a certain kind of groundswell of this. Would you agree with that observation?
No, it is a fact that most people who occupy the topmost positions in the government are from the RSS, and the RSS has its established ideology. It is based on the premise that we are we are a Hindu nation, and that everything Hindu ought to be promoted, and that it has a certain anathema towards certain religions, which everybody knows now. But at the same time, if people can belong to any kind of ideologies, but if you are sitting in the position of government, and if you occupy important positions therein, you cannot afford to be in fact blinded by those ideologies and allow those biases to be part of law, or to discriminate against certain communities in language or in policy. And it's very unfortunate that is what is happening today. Well, we hope that civil society, we have a very vibrant civil society. We have an equally vibrant opposition in this country, which is trying to make this
so far what we have seen is that the government is doubling on this. But stay with me, Ms. Rajlakshmi. Let me hop over to Dr. Lubna Sarwath here. Dr. Sarwath, there's a certain kind of groundswell in favor of Hindutva, the RSS ideology. A.G. Noorani came up last year in April. He came up with this book on RSS, which is a very revealing treatise. As I said in my opening, the Indian Supreme Court has actually granted bails to 14 convicts in the Gujarat pogroms. I mean, these guys were convicted of murder, rape, arson, looting. The Supreme Court has also instructed the high courts in the states not to take up petitions challenging the CAA. So it seems to me that the situation is deteriorating instead of stabilizing. What are your views?
Yeah, when you have the Prime Minister and the Home Minister, who are the leading members of the organization called RSS, and RSS is an organization which glorifies violence, and which actually talks about a totally non-inclusive ideology called the Hindutva. And then what else do we expect? And this is the government wherein minister after minister went on telling that they are not satisfied with the Constitution of India. So what do we expect? So the writing is clear on the wall. And we have to agree to that they are not doing anything without a strategy. Their promises are in the open. Everything is there in the manifesto. They are very clear about what they want. They have spelled it out. They have made a strategy, and they are achieving their strategy. But the problem in India is that the people who are opposing them the opposition mainly is to be blamed a lot, because they even today are not using the powers that are vested in the opposition MPs, the powers that are to be used, the existing, because all the institutions in India are actually overpowered by this ideology, the Hindu Rashtra that they want to establish. So in this scenario, the opposition has a large blame to take on, because the people on the streets are going way beyond their comfort zones and trying to protect India and every Indian and safeguard the Constitution of India. But sadly, the opposition MPs are way behind the youngsters and the women of India. Because, for example, you and our Rajlakshmi, we just talked about the Election Commission of India bringing out a certain punishment, which is not even a punishment, not even a penalty. When you are a minister and you are telling and you are making your people chant and some words, such violent words which I don't even want to repeat here. And in these words, if all that the Election Commission of India wants to tell that they cannot campaign for 3 days as a star campaigner, I am ashamed. I am ashamed of my Election Commission of India. And now, coming to the opposition's role, this minister is an MP of the Lok Sabha. In the Lok Sabha, we have something called the Ethics Committee, and we from Hyderabad and from many people across India, we have written to the Ethics Committee of the Lok Sabha telling that the Prime Minister, the Home Minister and all these people who are lying to the country are the members of the Lok Sabha, and Ethics Committee kindly take note of this. They have behaved unethically towards the country and towards their post. So kindly take action. We have written to 15 MPs of the Lok Sabha Committee, Ethics Committee. Where is the action? We have written to opposition MPs. Where is the action? I mean, we are not doing even at this moment when India is breaking up. At this moment also.
Okay, I get your Sarwath. Let me take this to Ms. Rajlakshmi. Rajlakshmi, this is a litany of complaints presented by Dr. Sarwath, and as I said, she is the Secretary General of the Socialist Party from the Telangana state. You want to quickly say something about what she has indicated?
No, I do agree with all that she said, because there is an anxiety, definitely, because when elected representatives call out to people to attack other people, it is a matter of huge concern, because then it's an open signal for people to take to violence. It is not, it can't be the same. One can't say that their behavior is sort of acceptable, because if an ordinary person would be saying these things, like it's happened in the case of a student who is supposed to have allegedly made some remarks for which sedition has been slapped against him, and he's been wanted by 3 or 4 governments of a country. Anyway, so what I'm saying is that this sends out a very bad signal to the people of our country, which I am concerned about, that the law applies differently to different people.
Let me ask you a direct question, Ms. Rajlakshmi. You've been a journalist for 23 years, and obviously before that also, you've been watching India as an Indian. Do you see or do you sense a change in the case of this government, in terms of how they approach the constitution, the laws of the land, how they approach other minority communities? Is there something that you think is very ominous here?
Of course, whenever there is a switch or a shift towards the right, there's always been this thing, seen or witnessed deep disregard for constitutional norms, or for the rule of law, or for any other norm. So this is what is happening here also. So there is an economic crisis today, I think, globally and also in India. So which are issues that need to be addressed very seriously. So most people
Well,
here
which
not
aren't
able
really
to.
being addressed. Which aren't being addressed. Thank you so much. That was Ms. T.K Rajlakshmi speaking with us. Let me go back to Dr. Sarwath. Dr. Sarwath, tell me, is there a growing sense that the Indian Supreme Court, I can refer to their decision about Babri Mosque. I can, refer to how they're looking at the petitions against the annexation of occupied Kashmir, that the court is kind of kowtowing to the executive, this particular BJP government. Is that sense correct?
Topping it all is that recently, when the petitions against the amendment to Citizenship Amendment CAA 2019, even when that has to be around more than 145 petitions were at the apex court, and the court twice instead of taking any decision, it said that until the violence on the street is not in control, it will not hear. So Supreme Court is there to discharge the justice based upon the petitions brought to it, and based upon the laws of the land and the Constitution of India and the natural principles of justice. But how is the violence was from the police? And how could that violence from the police, or if it was to tell that the students are violating, how is that an impediment to the Supreme Court to discharge the justice? One fails to understand that. So given all the track record of the Supreme Court in the last 4 or 5 years, and of late between the past 2 years at least, given the track record on the Masjid, or the Babri Masjid, or on the 370, or in this case, and it is, they are drifting away from the duty.
They're drifting away from those basic principles that are required to follow. Thank you so much. That was Dr. Lubna Sarwath, General Secretary of Socialist Party in the Telangana state of India. Thank you for your views. I'm also joined by Lieutenant General Waheed Arshad, the former Chief of General Staff of the Pakistan Army. Thank you, General Arshad, for being on the program. I want to specifically ask, with reference to Narendra Modi's statement speaking with personnel of the Indian military and saying that the Indian military can take on Pakistan and Pakistan will bite dust in 7 to 10 days. What do you think of this statement? Is it just bluster? What exactly is he signaling?
Well, first of all, obviously he's not a military man, so I can forgive him for this statement of, 7 to 10 days. And but I'm sure somebody must have put him up to it. It's easier said than done. I mean, both sides, he should know that his own armed forces and the Pakistani armed forces are very professional forces. So when you go to war, you can't fix a time frame of 7 days, 10 days, 15 days, because the moment first shot is fired, as we all know, the plans go out of the window. So who knows what's going to happen? Setting out objectives and strategy is all right, but then war has its own escalation dynamics, and I think people in position of responsibility like the Prime Minister of India should actually think 10 times before making such an aggressive statement of itching to go to war with Pakistan. I mean, it's amazing that a Prime Minister of a nuclear-armed country is talking of war when he's talking to cadets, not even, professional military personnel who have seen service, who have seen war. So it just speaks of the mindset. I mean, it's because, as the Foreign Office also said, I think he has an incurable, sort of obsession with Pakistan. To me, I think he looks scared. I don't know why should he make all these statements every 15 days or so, followed by his army chief and followed by some of his ministers. So they are actually...
Absolutely. Now, here's the thing. I'm very happy that you mentioned this. Now, Indian military has always been very professional, as is the Pakistan military. But over the last couple of years, what we've seen is that the Indian Army's highest leadership, including the former Army chief, who's now the Chief of Defense Staff, and also the new Army chief, who has taken over from him. Similarly, some of their other senior military leaders have spoken in terms that reek of some kind of political, undertones, as if they are trying to ingratiate themselves with the RSS BJP leadership. Now, if this sense is correct, then there is the danger that their professional assessment will be undermined by their political leanings towards the RSS BJP government. Is that some kind of, a threat to Pakistan? Are we looking at it, the military policy makers, in terms of how the dynamic could be, could be changing because of this new development on the Indian military side?
Yes, Ejaz, absolutely right. I mean, although it's not a surprise for me, I have always been of the view that Indian military does get itself involved in military, especially policy-making decisions. They are the ones who scuttled the Siachen agreement, actually. And but for the last, since Bipin Rawat's tenure, it's a very overt sort of, politicization of the Indian military, which their higher leadership has allowed the Indian armed forces to be used for political purposes by the BJP RSS combined. And I am not much worried about politicization, but I am more worried about, given the aggressive tones, there's a very big chance of miscalculation. When you start to chest thump and, when you make tall claims, then you want to back up with, actions which are not sort of informed by military logic and understanding. So there is a greater chance of miscalculation, not that the military is trying to sort of, score points with the government for their own reasons. I mean, it's amazing. It's always, Pakistan Army has always been accused of being political, but now there's the other side which is getting more political.
Absolutely. But is this something that you think, since, you have been at the highest planning levels of the Pakistan Army, that this is something that the planners at the highest level would be looking at, would be factoring in?
Absolutely, because, it leads to when the Indian military leadership and the political leadership both are making claims of teaching Pakistan lessons and doing this, doing that. When you look at it from a pure military perspective and threat perspective, I'm sure the people in the joint staff and the general staff of GHQ would be looking at it from the perspective of, increasing raids, propensity of crossing the line of control, undertaking fire raids, limited actions, just to prove their point to their own people that, look, what we were saying is right, and we can do anything at whatever time we want to. And they would not be worried about escalation like they did not when they did the Balakot strikes, and and they had to suffer that great embarrassment. So even at the cost of suffering that embarrassment, just to sort of, be, as they say, more loyal than the king, there will be a propensity to sort of do that and, be seen as heroes, whereas they know that it's going to get a very aggressive reply from Pakistan, and it's Pakistan which is going to do that escalation control, not them.
One final question, General Arshad. Since a lot of this also has to do with domestic political narrative building, is there something that we can do or we should do to sort of neutralize this narrative coming from India?
Well, Indian narrative is not surprising, really. I mean, it's both the military leadership as well as the political leadership have started to ride the tiger. They don't know how to get off it. And if we also start, building a war narrative, that will sort of escalate the whole situation. I think.
No, I wasn't talking about building a war narrative. I was talking about neutralizing their narrative in ways, in terms of perhaps, reaching out to the world community, telling them this is exactly what is being said from India, and, going on a diplomatic offensive with reference to this.
Well, Ejaz, to be honest, I think the diplomatic community knows what's happening. I mean, I'll be very surprised if the diplomatic community in India is not reporting back to their capitals, especially the key players, that this is what the leadership, both on the political and military side, are doing, and it's going to escalate the situation. And there's a need to sort of temper down the rhetoric. But looking at the reaction from the international community, I mean, it's very disappointing, obviously, to say the least. I mean, they understand what is happening in Kashmir. It's a terrible, brutal situation. Atrocities taking place. They understand what is happening to the minorities through the CAA and the National Register. And you look at the protest, and I mean, it's and the rhetoric against Pakistan. So there's this country with this leadership which is in control of the nuclear weapon systems, and it's an extremist mindset. I mean, they're always been accusing of Pakistan, about their nuclear capability and falling into the hands of extremists. Here's an extremist government which already has control of nuclear weapons. So I think the world should be more worried about India than they're worried about Pakistan.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lieutenant General Waheed Arshad speaking with us. We shall take a short break and return to discuss the outbreak of coronavirus and the global health emergency declared by the World Health Organization. Stay with us. Welcome back to Indus Special. With the coronavirus spreading outside China, the WHO on Thursday declared a global health emergency. The main reason for this declaration is not what is happening in China, but what is happening in other countries, the WHO chief said, addressing a presser. He said the main concern is the spread in countries with weaker health systems. Some 213 people have died in China and more than 10,000 affected. U.S. State Department has issued a level 4 travel advisory for U.S. citizens. Most countries have evacuated its citizens while others are in the process of evacuating. Pakistan, however, has taken the surprising decision to not evacuate students from Wuhan. This was stated by Special Assistant to the Prime Minister on Health, Dr. Zafar Mirza. More about this during the discussion on this health emergency. We have with us Professor Benjamin Neuman. He is a professor and chair of biological sciences at the Texas A&M University. Thank you for being with us, Professor Neuman. We also have Zoon Ahmed Khan, who's a journalist and analyst, joins us from Beijing. Thank you to you also, Zoon. Let me begin with Professor Neuman. Professor Neuman, now there's a global health emergency. What does this mean? There have also been, reports talking about this is probably even worse than the 1918 Spanish influenza, which reportedly impacted 500 million people, even at that time, across the globe. And now we are far more interconnected. So how much should we panic about this?
Well, the answer is none at all, because panic never helps. But in general, this is a very serious problem. Now, I like this move from the World Health Organization. Declaring this a public health emergency of international concern is a positive move. I don't think we'll see many changes in the way the disease is handled in China, because quite honestly, they have the infrastructure, they have the intellect, they have the people to be able to handle this. But as the disease spreads to other places, I think it'll be very good. And one other possible benefit is that, like in the last Ebola public health emergency, you may see funding coming in from other parts of the world. It was vaccines from other countries that were coming into Africa and new technologies that were tried out, and we may be opening up the way for that.
So how does this work? Because now the cases in various countries, and I'm assuming that, epidemiologists, virologists, they're constantly looking at what kind of strain this is. They're going to produce vaccines. Now, if there's any breakthrough, is there a certain global sort of communication system where that is passed on to all other countries that, here's a breakthrough and this is the kind of vaccine that you need?
That is exactly what the World Health Organization does. So they are basically the managerial department for the world's health organizations, and they're connecting up different countries and scientists in those countries. So the WHO itself is a really tiny bureaucratic organization. It doesn't have a lot of people to actually go out and do things, but they're very good at managing these sorts of problems.
So how does this, a little bit of perhaps technicality for the informed journalist about what really this is?
Yeah, you had a good point earlier on looking at the different sequences. So I think as of yesterday afternoon, at least, there were 5 different sequences, and that was 2 from Hong Kong, 2 from America, and 1 from China that were available, full genome-length sequences. And this is really interesting and really wonderful for the scientists who are going to be working on this, to have a little picture of what the diversity of this virus is, as well as what sort of parts you can find in the virus and what they all do. Now, the interesting thing here is that this virus is mutating a tiny bit, but it's actually a little less than I would expect. Over the course of a month, I think between those 5 strains, there are only either 12 or 13 differences. And some of these differences are what we would even call silent differences. They don't even make any real meaningful difference to the virus. This is quite interesting because it may indicate that this virus is relatively trapped, that it sort of can't mutate from the position where it currently is and still be a functional virus. We would have to do more tests to be able to figure this out. But if that is the case, that does make it ripe for vaccine development in a way that other coronaviruses have had problems with vaccine development.
So once someone is affected, what are the chances of survival of that person?
So those numbers are still coming in. What we know is that from the first couple of hundred cases that were in, about 25% were serious enough that the person had to go to the hospital and had some sort of acute respiratory distress, a disease that would be similar in a clinical manifestation to what you would have seen with SARS. Right now, the death rate is only around 2%, although these numbers may be reflecting a little bit of the way that we test. So during SARS, it's been suspected that there were a lot of cases that existed in the community but just didn't result in disease and went unreported. And what I think we're getting here is a very clear picture of exactly how many cases there are. Now, if we're looking for good news, for the last 2 or 3 days, the number of new cases per day has been pretty much leveling off, somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 new cases a day, which sounds like a lot and definitely is a lot. But if you look at this over the first few days, it was growing exponentially, absolutely out of control, and growing at a much quicker rate than SARS. So it seems to spread faster than SARS, but it causes many fewer deaths, fewer complications than SARS. It's its own virus. It's a distinct thing.
Okay, thank you so much. That was Benjamin Neuman speaking with us about the coronavirus. Let me hop over to Zoon Ahmed Khan. Zoon, we have decided, surprisingly, that we're not going to evacuate our students from Wuhan. I think there are about 500 of them. The government is basically defending this by saying, well, we really do not have the facilities where we can quarantine these people. What is your sense of what's happening with those students in Wuhan? And I believe there are at least 4 cases that have been detected of students that contracted this.
Yeah, there was a 5th one today from the students that I'm in touch with, according to them. So the thing is, Ejaz, honestly, it is a delicate and tough. It's a tough situation to be in, for sure. The number of students in Wuhan is actually much more than 500. These are just the registered students, and of course, they have been provided with the basic.
Sorry, when you say registered students, you saying students registered with the Pakistan embassy or students registered with the universities there?
To register with the embassies and consulates, but everyone doesn't do that. And of course, when this kind of an emergency situation hits you, then they push people to register. So everyone does not register. That is a fact. And the registered students are 500, but there are a few hundred more than that. That said, the embassy, when the situation started getting much worse, especially on the 24th, when it was announced that this is a state of emergency, people were told not to go outdoors all over China. And of course, we saw that we were asked to wear masks. These hospitals were constructed in emergency. So all of this obviously created a state of discomfort, to say the least. And since then, the students that I'm in touch with who are in Wuhan, they say that, of course, I mean, they're being provided with food, hygienic food. They're being checked every single day. and they have access to 24/7 medical facilities. Now, the thing is that just as your previous guest mentioned, actually the numbers are not increasing at the same pace. So even though in absolute numbers, in an absolute sense, it seems like the disease is spreading much faster, actually, even according to some specialists in China, they expect that it will peak within the next few days. That means they don't advise shifting people, evacuating people from China to Pakistan towards worse facilities in a situation where they make more people vulnerable. And obviously, I personally think that it's something we should consider. We definitely should be in touch with the students, which the embassy is. They are worried. They are being provided a better environment that can deal with the ongoing situation than they ever can in Pakistan, given the current situation. But that said, they are tense. And obviously, with each passing day, we see the numbers increasing. With Pakistani students having been diagnosed, that definitely adds to the stress levels.
So most reports indicate that while the Chinese government has gone on a war footing now, the fact is that initially, when this whole thing hit the people in Wuhan, and this was sometime early to mid-November last year, there wasn't much concern. And as a matter of fact, some reports, if they are to be believed, say that the Chinese, or at least the local whatever governmental structure that there is in Wuhan, tried to cover this up.
There is speculation about this. For sure, a few cases were reported at that time. They did make it to the media. People knew that there is this new virus that is not easy to deal with, but the scale was very small. And of course, I mean, to what extent this was mismanagement, I think there will be consequences for people who did not look into the situation in time. And that definitely contributed to the scale at which we are observing.
So you believe that the decision taken by the government to not evacuate the students from Wuhan or elsewhere in China is actually a good decision, because you think that they are being provided proper facilities there, and that those facilities would not be available in Pakistan, presumably.
They are definitely not available in Pakistan. That is a fact. The extent to which the Chinese government is investing in being able to tackle with this in a more effective way, day by day, we don't have that kind of expertise, and we don't have that experience. So I do think that with time, we know whether or not maybe in a few days we can decide to evacuate them. But for now, this is not recommended. And it is true that if we bring them to Pakistan, maybe we will be dealing with a situation that we don't know how to wrap our heads around. So it's definitely, even experts within China, both governments are coordinating. The students are in touch with authorities. Their health is being monitored on a regular basis. So given all of that, I think that it could increase the risk we are putting them through. And this is something
so are these students being kept in a certain space? Like, are they quarantined?
They're in their hostels. Basically, Wuhan has so many residents. I mean, 60 million people are in the situation that our students are in right now. So obviously, Wuhan's population is 11 million, but the surrounding areas are all in this quarantine. Mobility has been limited to reduce the extent to which the virus will spread. The reason that right now we have the virus in all 31 provinces of China and in over 20 countries is because people were traveling. So to move people from one country to another, and especially given that Pakistan has hundreds of students in Wuhan, could add to that risk, is all I'm saying.
Okay. Thank you. Ahmed Khan speaking with us. We're also joined by Dr. Mohammed Munir, who's a virologist from Lancaster University in the UK. Dr. Munir, thank you for being with us on the program. I just wanted to ask you a question that I asked the previous panelist also. The government of Pakistan has decided not to evacuate the students from Wuhan. There's been some criticism of that development. What is your view about this? Because the government says that they've taken this decision because it's easier for the students to be kept there and be treated rather than for them to be brought here?
Let me speak on to some scientific lines. What is the point of evacuating is that the infrastructure in Wuhan, especially if not in entire China, is pretty much crowded and it's overwhelmed by the number of patients those are there. That's the first point. And the second point is that we can't anticipate how long this whole scenario would stay. And given this ambiguity of the length of this outbreak, how can one decide to sort of contain them in their hostels? That's the third thing that I would like to emphasize onto the fact is that Japan, Australia, France, Italy, Turkey, and United Kingdom, they have decided to evacuate their people from the epicenter of this epidemics. So on the grounding that they cannot anticipate how long the situation would stay. When it comes to the capabilities, it's pretty simple. It's not really a rocket science to bring them back into the countries and quarantine for a fortnight, only 2 weeks. It's not going to make a big difference. And if someone show any clinical sign, put them on a therapy and isolate them, and the rest would be happy and would have a possibility to meet their families.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Mohammad Munir, speaking with us. This is all for this week from Indus Special. We shall see you next Thursday at the same time. Meanwhile, for latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Good night and goodbye.